Don't be this type of seller. Yes, inventory is still low, buyer demand is still high in many markets out there, and yes, it is still a seller's market. But that in no way means that you can completely throw the fundamentals out the window when you're trying to get the top price for your home. And that's exactly what we're going to discuss in today's video. We're going to talk about some common mistakes that I'm seeing a lot of sellers make at the moment, primarily because they believe they're in full control. Because it's a seller's market, they think, I don't have to do some of these things that I would normally have to do in order to get top price for my home. And that couldn't be any more untrue. Now, I know a lot of sellers out there want to maximize price, they want to maximize time, and they want to do it with the least amount of money coming out of pocket. And I can completely understand that, because that should be the number one goal when listing your home for sale. But at the same time, there are some things that I suggest as somebody that's been listing property for over 20 years that will not only increase the exposure on your property, but that exposure will drive demand, and that demand will ultimately drive a higher price. So let's take a couple minutes here and talk about some things that you should be doing as a seller in order to maximize price of your home. But before we do that, I'd like to take a minute and ask a favor. If you find any value in my videos at all, do me a favor and hit that thumbs up. And if you want to stay updated on everything Orange County and real estate related, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. Unfortunately, the last couple of years in real estate have ruined the perception of real estate, because prior to the pandemic, not only did real estate have this cyclical flow every year, but at the same time, we also had never seen this absolute craziness in the market where people were stepping over each other to get to properties, bidding way above the asking price, waiving all contingencies, doing all of these crazy things in order to get their offer accepted. And because of that, that's what a lot of people remember over the last couple of years. They just remember how competitive the housing market was. They remember inventory was low, buyer demand was high, and therefore I can pretty much list my property at any price and do absolutely nothing, and I'm still going to get multiple offers and likely sell my home for much more than I ever anticipated. And while there's a possibility that that still could happen, I believe that it's super important to control the controllables when it comes to selling your house. What can you control? You can't control how many people show up to the open house. You can't necessarily control how many offers you get or what prices they offer. But what you can control is how you present that property online, how it looks in photos, the repairs that you've done, on top of how you decide to ultimately price that home at the end of the day. And that's really what I want to talk about in today's video. And the number one thing I want to focus on first is price. Yes, it's a seller's market. Yes, inventory is still really, really low in a lot of markets out there. And because of that, we're still seeing a lot of multiple offers on property. In fact, I just got back from a showing about 20 minutes ago where I showed a $1.9 million property here in Orange County. And guess what? It's only been on the market 4 days and they already have 10 offers. But with that, there are some things that that property did right that drew exposure, that drew that demand, that's ultimately going to drive the price of that home. And that's where I want to start today. And with that, it comes down to price. Now, this particular property that I'm talking about could have listed the property higher. There was a close comparable home that sold not that long ago for $2.1 million. Now, that property had a little bit larger lot, had a swimming pool, might have been a little bit nicer on the inside when it comes to upgrades, but it definitely wasn't a $200,000 difference in the price. So what did these people do right? Well, they priced the property at $1.9 million when in fact they could have priced it a little bit higher. Why 1.9? Why is that the right number? Because it's fair market value. I believe based on other comparable homes in the neighborhood, the home could have sold somewhere between $1.9 million and $2 million. Now, we don't know where it's going to end up, but had the seller, had the agent on the other side started at the high side of that price, say near 2 million or even 2.1 where the other one sold, chances are it would have gotten less activity, less potential buyers coming to that property. Why? Because the higher the price, the less able buyers you have able to put offers in on that home. Now, there's a chance that the property does end up selling for $2 million, and some of those people that put in offers just aren't going that high, aren't able to qualify for that much. But here's what's really, really important. By having a lot of people in the property when it's getting shown, the agent being able to tell other agents that, hey, we have 10 other offers, it automatically sends this idea out there that we're not only above the asking price, we're probably way above the asking price to some degree, and that if you want this home, you're going to have to get aggressive and do additional things that you might not otherwise do in order to have your offer stand out and ultimately get accepted. So where a lot of sellers get this wrong is they try to start on the high side of the price. They're trying to maximize price, which is ultimately the goal for sellers. But what most sellers don't understand is that you need more eyeballs on property to get that buyer demand going to ultimately drive that price. Now, you don't want to price it well below what you think it's worth, but you do want to price it at a price that you feel like is reasonable for that home that will also drive more eyeballs on it. And that's exactly what these sellers did here. So if you're a seller out there looking to price your home, don't go crazy on the price of that home. Instead, look at the comparables and price more towards the middle of where those comparables are versus the high side of those comparables, because ultimately you could end up reaping the rewards by driving more demand to that property and in turn driving the price of that home. Now, another thing this particular property did really, really well is that it was clean. There wasn't a lot of clutter in the home. There was a seller still living in the home, so some of the bedrooms were furnished. Some of the rooms had furniture in them, but two things. It wasn't a complete blank slate in the property where if you're a buyer coming in, you notice every little detail in the home, because that's typically what happens. When you have a blank slate as a property, there's absolutely no furniture in it at all, the seller's eyes start to wander. They look at the baseboards, they look at the ceilings, they look at the walls, and buyers should be doing that. But when there's furniture there, buyers more or less forget about some of the details of the property and they just kind of flow through the rooms. They want to see where furniture is located because that's what they're thinking. And it's not that as a seller you're trying to trick anyone, but you do want buyers to not get caught up in some of the minor details that don't really matter. Remember, people buy emotionally and they justify logically. So what I often see is the properties that have no furniture in them at all don't really grab the emotion of buyers, because sometimes buyers have a really difficult time figuring out where their furniture would go, along with many of them not really having an eye for design. So on the flip side, you don't want a home that has a lot of clutter in it as well, because too much stuff makes the property seem really small and ultimately it ends up not showing very well. So if you're a seller out there, there's kind of this perfect medium, if you will, where there's enough furniture to kind of show the rooms as they are, which also makes them look spacious, gives a buyer an idea where the furniture is going to be, versus the other side when there's so much furniture in it that it's hard to walk around. You can't really picture anything because there's just too much going on. So as a seller, take the time to declutter. If the home is vacant because you've moved out, it's worth your time and money to get that home staged. If your agent isn't recommending staging, then that might not be the right agent. And I know a lot of times when sellers hear that, they say, I don't want to pay any extra money to stage my home. Understand, if it's done correctly, that money that you're paying for staging is made back up in the price that you receive that home because of the way that it's going to make it show. And at the same time, I know a lot of sellers out there say, well, there's not a lot of inventory to choose from, so I'm the only property in my neighborhood. Why do I have to do this? Because ultimately, it will still end up helping you get more money. Taking that extra step, paying a little bit of money for staging could be the difference in your home selling at the asking price versus over the asking price in many cases. And along on that same topic, if there are any obvious repairs in the property that need to be addressed, address those prior to listing the home. Take the time, fix the minor stuff. Now, back during the pandemic when things were crazy, interest rates were so low and all the frenzy was happening, a lot of sellers out there didn't really have to do some of these basic things in their home because it was still going to sell and it was going to sell at a premium. Even though inventory is still really low right now, we don't have the same type of market that we had a couple of years ago. So as a seller, it's worth taking the time to do some of this stuff in order to help you end up maximizing the price of that home. Now, the last thing I want to talk about today is an obvious one, and that is not choosing the right agent. Now, how do you know you've chosen the right agent or not? Really hard to tell without actually going through the process. But as a potential seller, it's worth your time to interview a couple of different people to figure out who you mesh well with, to figure out what kind of marketing plan they have, what kind of experience they have, along with getting an idea of what they think the home is worth, what they're going to do to sell it, how long it's going to take, all of those different things. And because there's a lot of pressure on commissions at the moment and everybody knows a real estate agent, a lot of sellers out there just go with, the easy choice. Hey, my friend just got their license. I'm going to use them to sell my home. Or this agent isn't charging me as much commission. I'm going to use this agent. Understand, you get what you pay for. If your agent isn't trying to negotiate with you in some degree during the listing presentation, then they're probably not an agent that can actually negotiate on your behalf. If you're looking to maximize price, maximize time, and really get the most bang for your buck, then you need an experienced professional to guide you through that process. So don't shortcut it. Don't just go with the person that sends you a mailer every single month and you have no idea who they are, or the top agent in the neighborhood. That doesn't necessarily mean they're the top agent. They just market the best in the neighborhood. So make sure you interview that agent, but also interview a couple of other people just to confirm that you're making the right choice and not setting yourself up for failure. Now, I realize this is really self-serving, but if you don't know an agent here locally, you're looking for a professional, someone to help you maximize the price, I would love to be one of those people that you interview, to have an opportunity to sit down with you, ultimately help guide you through that process and tell you how I can help you maximize price. So if you're looking for that person, want someone else to interview, do me a favor. My contact information is in the description below. I would love to have that conversation. Understand that selling a home is much more than just putting a sign in the yard and throwing it on the internet. As we discussed earlier, it's all about exposure. That exposure driving demand, demand driving price. You need an agent that's going to maximize the exposure on that property. How are they going to do that? Well, that's exactly the conversation you should be having when you're interviewing them to sell your house. Now, if you have additional questions about selling, what that looks like here in Orange County in 2024, do me a favor and check out this video here.